welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Flight Path Zone. There goes another one. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Now, it's episode number 205 of the Skeptic Zone podcast for the 22nd of September. As another aircraft disappears. This is attempt number 48 of trying to do this intro, because every time I do it, an aircraft flies over. But you know what? I've given up. Let's just get on with it. Thank you to all those people who donated, chipped in to help me buy some software I need to finish the Vaccination Chronicles, the new documentary I'm working on. Almost reached my goal, and of course that is enough for me to get that software upgrade. It's a wonderful example of listeners chipping in to really help. And when that documentary comes out, those listeners who did help, your names will be in the credit as a special thank you. It means a lot, and it also means a lot to me to know that every now and then, when I think it's necessary, my listeners are ready to come to the aid of the party, so to speak, and really help. Thank you again. But on to this week's show before another plane comes over. We're going to have a wonderfully long interview that our friend Maynard conducted at TAM Las Vegas with Ben Radford. Now, Ben Radford, what an adventurous life he has, folks. He really is one of those investigators who gets out there and looks under the bed and looks behind the door and goes out investigating in person, interviews people, travels far and wide to get to the bottom of mysteries. Oh, here comes another one. Wow, it really is flight path time at the moment. Anyway, Ben Radford, a wonderful interview coming up to kick off this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, and that's quite a lengthy interview, but well worth the listen. Then after the break, I catch up with a very good man, Adam VanlangenbergWhy from Melbourne, a skeptical teacher who runs a skeptical club in his high school. Now recently he conducted an experiment where he had students with buckets on their head. Yes, students with buckets on their head. Why would you put buckets on the head of students? Find out a little bit later on in the Skeptic Zone. And I'm delighted to say that Adam VanlangenbergWhy will be a guest at the forthcoming Australian Skeptics Convention in Melbourne, along with DJ Grothy, Rebecca Watson, Lynn Kelly, Dr. Rachie, myself, and James Randi. Tickets are still on sale. Check out www.vicskeptics.wordpress.com to find out more and book your ticket. I know that we're going to have a great time in Melbourne. And speaking of conventions, that's interesting because 10 years ago, 2002, I was in Melbourne for the Australian Skeptics Annual Convention. Wow, 10 years have gone by. And as it happened, I was there not only to do bits and pieces at the convention. I was, as coincidence would have it, I was president of the Australian Skeptics then, 10 years ago, as I am now. And I videoed the convention. And in fact, over the last decade, I have been videoing many Australian Skeptics conventions. And we've decided to put a lot of those videos up online over the last 10 years, bit by bit. If you go to www.skeptics.com.au, mouse over the Publications tab at the top of the page, you'll see a drop-down menu come up, and one of the options is Convention Videos. Lots of videos there from Skeptics conventions in Australia over the past decade or so. And while you're at skeptics.com.au, if you're in Sydney, you still have time to buy tickets for the Skeptics Dinner Meeting coming up on the 29th of September with special guest Tori Shepherd, Punch columnist and chief reporter for News.com, talking all about the paranormal and pseudoscientific in the media. Skeptics dinners in Sydney, they're different from Skeptics in the pub. They're a little bit more formal. A nice dinner and a very interesting talk. Book your tickets now in the next few days while you still have a chance at www.skeptics.com.au, and I shall see you there. But now it's time for me to have some nice fish fingers and custard while you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
I tell you what, folks, Skeptic Zone fans, Dirty Disbeliever fans, we've got a guy for you, Ben Radford. Just explain who you are and what sort of stuff you've been investigating and why do you do that to yourself?
Well, I'm Benjamin Radford. I am the Deputy Editor of Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine. I'm a research fellow with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, nonprofit educational organization. I also write books and do investigations. I've written 6 or 7 books, 6 books with the 7th one coming out. And I'm best known for doing investigations of what you would call weird things.
That's what we like to hear, a bit of a punctuation there. Now, what is the one weird thing you haven't got to yet that's in your to-do, weird-do part of your brain?
There's actually a strange place called the Coral Castle in Florida, and it's this giant, it's sort of like Stonehenge type thing.
Is that where the guys rumored to have made it by levitating it and using sonic waves, similar to what the ancient alien theorists would have told the Egyptians? Because I've seen that on Ancient Aliens, and what do you think it is?
Well, I've looked into it. I haven't personally been there. I'm actually hoping to go there later this year. But it's pretty clear, the guy that created it, a guy named Edward Leedskalnin, he claimed that he did it using the same methods that the ancient Egyptians used. If that's true, then that solves the mystery, because we actually know how the pyramids were built. So in a way, if the main proponent of the claim is being honest with us, then really there's no mystery.
But hang on, I've been told that we still don't know how they built that, and we could not replicate that today, even with modern building materials.
I've heard that as well, and that is, I think, what they call bullocks. The fact of the matter is that we actually have pretty good records in terms of how the ancient Egyptians made it. And this is nothing new. You can look up it now. I first read it in National Geographic magazine, which is, hardly an arm of the conspiracy theory wing. It's all right there if you bother to take the time to do it.
And is there any look? Because I love Ancient Aliens, and look, I'm a big Von Daniken fan. Mm-hmm. I even dared to mention the name to Randy yesterday. And as a child, that really fired my imagination in a big way, and still does, and I like watching it. And I spoke to some people only last night that thought it was a great gateway drug to studying real archaeology. Do you think there's a nugget to these shows where they are actually quite valuable and they're not as bad as a lot of skeptics would make out?
I'm not so convinced by that argument, primarily because a lot of times the underlying bases and premises are so badly wrong. When you've got people like Von Daniken and people who are saying that, for example, the glyphs in the desert in Chile, the Nazca Plains, for example, could only have been created by aliens, it's simply not true. And you can argue that, well, yeah, but it's interesting people in history and archaeology. And my answer is, it's interesting them in false information. It's interesting them in false mysteries.
Now, actually, you do a lot of investigations, so like a lot of skeptics, there must be one that you think is truly dangerous. What is the most misheld belief that you've investigated that could do some real harm to people?
Probably the ones that involve the medical issues, because if you believe in UFOs, you believe in the Yahweh or whatever else, that's fine. There's you can believe whatever you want. At the point in which you're going to people who are claiming to do faith healing, who are claiming to give you medicines which are homeopathic and they have no active ingredient, things like that. Anti-vaccination. I mean, in Australia, you have a strong anti-vax contingent that I'm often reading about and doing great work over there for many of the skeptics. At that point, you're harming real people in many cases, irreparably, in children. And so this is, to my mind, that's the real danger there.
So things that are dangerous. So how do you separate your emotion from these issues sometimes when you're investigating them to try and be as impartial as possible?
Well, I don't have a problem with it because at the end of the day, I don't have a vested interest in this matter. I personally don't care whether Bigfoot exists. I personally don't care whether psychic powers exist or ghosts or whatever else. It's not I don't lose sleep either way. My issue is, what is the truth? And when I go do an investigation into a ghost or a haunting, for example, I want to know what the answer is. If the answer is that there's a ghost, great. Or the answer is that there's psychic powers or crop circles made by aliens, then that's fine. So in the topics that I investigate, I actually don't have that strong a personal interest in it. So it's not I'm not personally, affronted or embellished if I find or don't find something. So that's how I keep my personal. Of course, everybody brings their own personal perspectives and biases to each position investigation and each topic. But in terms of trying to guide it in one way or the other, I don't really have that problem in terms of separating out the personal from the professional.
What about some issues that the usual defence is that it is actually outside science, so it can't be investigated? I'd say maybe some alien abduction accounts fall into that, because you can't prove it because of the way our reality has been altered by the aliens. How can you investigate something like that?
Well, that's a common misperception that I hear people say, well, how can you possibly investigate ghosts? They're beyond science, or psychic powers are beyond science, or alien abductions in the case that you gave. And the answer is that they're not beyond science. Science is the method through which we understand our world, whether it's physics, geology. I mean, everything around us can be understood through science. And if someone is making a claim that, for example, they were abducted by aliens, that's not beyond science. I mean, either if they're claiming that this happened, in their neighborhood at 3:00 on a Sunday afternoon, and there was a spaceship hovering overhead, either other neighbors saw it, or they didn't see it. This is not a matter of opinion. This is not a matter of subjective experience. There are, for all these topics, there are and should be, falsifiable scientific claims about them. And if someone comes up to me and says, I believe in ghosts, or I believe I was abducted, my answer is, okay, good for you. I'm glad. What do you want me to tell you? I'm not going to try and disprove that. If, on the other hand, someone says, I believe in ghosts or UFOs or psychics because I have evidence or because something convinced me, then I'm going to say, well, hold on here. What exactly is that? And if they just come back to you and say, well, I just want to believe, then there's nothing scientific about that claim. There's nothing you can investigate.
And speaking of investigation, you've looked into the chupacabra, and what did you find, sir?
What did I find?
I said, what did you find, sir? I said that in a Mighty Boosh kind of way.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book on that. It actually was nominated for 2 book awards this year. I'm pleased about that. The book is called Tracking the Chupacabra, the Vampire Beast in Fact, Fiction, and Folklore. And it's actually been taken seriously in several scholarly and academic journals, which I'm quite pleased about. So I don't know if I can really summarize 200 and some pages of 5 years of research in a sentence, but essentially what I found, and the chupacabra, for those who don't know, it's the world's first or second or third best known monster after Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster.
And does it actually translate to goat sucker?
It does.
Which sounds like a great hip hop track. Goat sucker.
Right, a little bling or something going on there. It's said to. Well, the interesting thing about the chupacabra is that, unlike, for example, Bigfoot or Nessie, it's a vampire. That's part of its nature. It's a in fact, it's the world's second best known vampire after Dracula. Right.
So it is in fact otherworldly almost immediately, because vampires don't correspond with anything we know in the natural world.
Well, I mean, in some cases, you have leeches, you have vampire bats, you mosquitoes. I mean, so there are blood-sucking animals. The question is, are the characteristics that are being reported in regarding the chupacabra, are those plausible? Is there any reason to think this is more than just a cultural myth? And in my research, which again it took me 5 years to finish, I looked at it from a folkloric point of view, from forensics. I interviewed medical examiners. I basically approached it from all possible angles, trying to figure out what is this monster, this creature. And there's basically 2 different forms. The first one is a bipedal, spiky-backed alien-type creature that was first seen in Puerto Rico in 1995. And then that version sort of came and went, and then the second version that came up around 2000 was basically like a hairless dog, or a dog, or coyote, or dingo, or something like that, basically a canid that didn't have any hair. And so you have these 2 completely different versions of the chupacabra, and the original first version was only only occasionally seen by like eyewitnesses, but there were never any bodies found. In the second case, you have exactly the opposite. You have bodies found, but nobody seeing these vampirism in action. So I had to sort of look at these two different types of chupacabras and reconcile them and put them in historical and cultural context.
And during a 5-year investigation in something as intense as this, is there one stage where you thought, I'm going to give this up, or I'm going to wrap this up quickly because I've had enough of it? I mean, did it really get to you? Because, I mean, you're talking about folklore, you're interviewing lots of people. It's a fairly lengthy process you've gone through. I mean, 5 years looking at one phenomenon.
Yeah, and you bring up an excellent question. And part of the answer is that as an investigator, it takes as long as it takes to solve the mystery. And part of the problem you see on these TV shows like Ghost Hunters and all these documentaries
is you've got 58 minutes and a 60-minute hour.
Exactly. It gives people, first of all, it gives audiences the impression that somehow what they're doing is scientific, and oftentimes it's completely unscientific. But it also gives the impression that mysteries can be solved in an hour or overnight or a day or a week. And I've investigated hundreds of different things: crop circles, ghosts, Bigfoot, chupacabras, psychics, you name it. And I've solved some mysteries in an afternoon, and some mysteries take me 18 months, and some mysteries take you 5 years. And the difference is you have to be willing to put in the work. It's not that I'm so brilliant or so smart or such a great investigator. The difference is, the reason that I solve these cases, and these globally known cases sometimes, is that I'm willing to put in the work and put in the time and the effort. And a lot of times what you find is that someone calling it a mystery, oh, it's unexplained, we'll never know, all that means is that they're not willing to put in the effort to find the answer.
Well, Benjamin Radford, are you a very single-minded guy? When you're packing a suitcase, you just pack the suitcase and don't anyone talk to me. When you're listening to the radio, everyone, shh, be quiet. You got that intense personality there?
Well, I certainly do when it comes to different topics, because investigation topics, because it's easy to get sidelined if you're doing investigations and you're examining the different claims. And I wrote about this in my book, Scientific Paranormal Investigation: How to Solve Unexplained Mysteries. I go sort of how to do these sorts of investigations in 6 or 7 case studies. And so when you're approaching these topics, it's very important to focus on the claims and not get. It's easy to get sidetracked. Oh, go here, go there. No, figure out exactly what the claims are and go with them. And so I think that a certain single-mindedness and determination is essential for doing real investigations.
And what about cattle mutilation? No doubt you've looked at that as well. That's one that I've seen time and time again. It seems to be solved some way, or it seems to be put into the unknown category, because those marks can only be made by a laser. That is only someone who knows what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, and the cattle mutilations is an interesting phenomenon because it actually intersects quite a bit with my chupacabra investigation. There's lots of overlap, because the chupacabra, even though it's known for sucking goats, it also sucks the blood out of bunnies, dogs, cats, cattle, things like that. And so I did a fair amount of cattle mutilation investigation for my chupacabra book, and of course that also ties in with UFOs, because some people. So what's interesting is that you can have exactly the same dead animal. Let's say, for example, you have a cow that has 2 puncture wounds in the neck and is apparently drained of almost all its blood. You can have 3 completely different cultural contexts in which you'll have 3 different interpretations. So, for example, if that cow was found in 1997 Puerto Rico, the answer would be it's a chupacabra. The chupacabra got it. If that exact same cow was found in 1970s New Mexico, let's say late 70s, it would be called an alien abduction. People would say, yes, this cow was abducted by aliens, and they were doing these weird experiments. And if it was found in the mid 80s, say in the American Midwest, it would be Satanists.
That's what I thought the third one was going to be. I thought because they were moved into it as well.
Exactly.
So, and of course, are any of them correct? By the way, just to save us a lot of time.
No, none of them are correct. And that's the beauty of it, is that when you look at this, you see you have the exact same phenomenon. An identical creature that is found in 3 different cultural, social contexts is going to be interpreted 3 completely and mutually exclusive ways. This is not. Even if one of them was correct, the other 2 can't be correct. Anyways, but the short answer is that no, none of them are correct, because if you do the forensic investigation, you find that, in fact, many of these animals are killed by ordinary predation. You have 2 puncture wounds in the neck. It seems very mysterious until you realize that they didn't die from blood loss. They died from internal hemorrhaging. And so it can be very mysterious to a farmer, or just again, these are not scientists; these are just people working on ranch hands. They're just.
But we always hear that they work with these animals every day, so they know exactly what they're like, and they're used to seeing things. And this is something unusual on their farm. That's what.
Yeah, and that's not true. I'll just cut to the chase in there. The fact of the matter is, I mean, I've talked to ranchers, for example, who have told me we know most of the time when a dog attacks like a sheep or a goat, it'll rip the neck out. And that's simply not true. I mean, just factually inaccurate. And we know this because you can talk to animal predation experts. And I did that. I did a lot of research on that. And when you look at, so I mean, it's true that sometimes a coyote or a dog will rip up something and cause a lot of blood. Other times it won't. They'll just simply bite the neck, and it'll move on to something else, and it'll simply die. And so, it's interesting because you would expect that would be true. You would expect that, oh yeah, well they deal with this every day. They should know better. And the answer is they should know better, but they don't.
And of course, an Australian UFO sighting that always has had my interest and is a very difficult one to prove, but is one of the biggest mass sightings in history, is the Westall 66 sighting, in which a number of school kids in daylight saw an object in the sky for a period of time. Have you ever looked at that case at all? And you got any theories with that?
I have not looked at that case. I heard a little bit about it. UFOs are not my specialty. I know quite a bit about them, but the thing about UFOs as a topic is that it runs so deep.
And it's so wide as well.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, there's a handful of like hardcore UFO researchers. Phil Klass was late. Phil Klass, Robert Schaefer is excellent. And again, I know quite a bit about certain particular cases. I'm more of a generalist. Everything from cryptozoology to ghosts to psychics. Although I know quite a bit about UFOs. That particular case, I don't really know enough about to hazard a guess on.
What would your guess be?
If I were to hazard a guess,
now you can't use swamp gas because it's not near a swamp. You can't use an inversion layer because there wasn't one that day.
I would say that my guess is that they actually did see a UFO. That is, they saw something that was flying in the sky that they could not identify.
Strictly. Good. Now, if I'm going looking for a ghost or something otherworldly, what is the best tool for me to use? I see lots of different meters on these ghost shows, electromagnetic. Of course, I'm a bit of a fan of EVP, big fan of EVP. Yeah. A good bit of pareidolia goes a long way with me.
Yeah, oh my God.
So what tool should I use?
Well, the first tool that you should use is your brain.
Now, immediately, you've lost half the audience here because you've just said that we've got to go out, do a bit of study, perhaps even go to a tertiary institution. Who's got time for that kind of stuff?
Well, my investigations begin usually with research and scholarship and figuring out what's going on. So
you never see that bit on the Ancient Aliens. You never see the study bit.
It's not interesting. It's not sexy to be on TV. A lot of the research that I do, again, the hard trudgery work of investigations, it's not interesting. It's going through online archives. It's going to the library. It's just digging up research journals from 1948
and spending a fair bit of time on your own.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is not, and this is what I try to tell people when people come up to me and they say, oh, I've seen you on TV, I've seen you doing investigations, this is really cool. How do I do that? And my answer is, I can show you how to do it, but you need to understand it's not necessarily fun, it's not necessarily easy, it's not quick. And it takes scholarship. And if you're not willing to do the research, then don't bother.
And also, you're out there harshing a few people's mellow as well. When you come up with answers that they don't want to hear or they not interested in, you become a bad guy.
Yeah, well, in some cases. In some cases, you do good. I mean, there's been a handful of ghost cases, for example, where I actually helped a family, where there were families who were sincerely scared to be in their own house. And it wasn't until they brought in a skeptical investigator, such as myself, that they were reassured. And so I was certainly there are times when I'm, as you said, harshing people's mellow because I'm giving them a more skeptical perspective. Other times, however, I'm reassuring them that what they have to fear, they don't need to fear. And that's actually a big part of my job, is calming people's fears, whether it's fears about vaccinations, fears about ghosts, fears about alien abductions, fears about monsters. A lot of my job is figuring out, identifying what people are afraid of and why, and investigate it and trying to explain to them why they should not be afraid.
And how quickly in an investigation do you often work out that it could be self-delusion or there is some actual deliberate fakery going on?
Well, I've actually found relatively little deliberate fakery. It certainly is true that I've encountered hoaxing in my time in just about all areas, crop circles primarily, but also ghosts and whatever else. But most of the time when people come to me with experiences, whether it's ghosts, whether it's, Yowie sightings or chupacabra sightings, what have you, they're sincere people. They're honest, good. They're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. They're not trying to get rich. They had some weird experience that they can't explain. And so much of the time, I have a degree in psychology. And so I bring that to my investigations. And so when I'm interviewing an eyewitness, when I'm interviewing someone who's had this experience they can't explain, I try and get in their mind, say, hey, I try to understand from their point of view, because I can explain to them what I found in my books and my research. But more importantly, in a way, it doesn't matter what I say. The question is, what are they going to interpret? How are they going to take it? And so a lot of times when you're talking to eyewitnesses who are very, very passionate about what they saw, again, you have to understand it from their point of view. And say, okay, why would they be thinking that? And then you sort of bring their perspective, have your perspective, and try to bring the two together for basically a common goal, a common understanding.
Look, I've heard it said many times that the plural of anecdote is not data. Is that definitely true?
Yeah, I would say so. Anecdotes have a place in research. There's no denying that. I mean, anecdotes are not worthless, and I've never suggested otherwise. The same thing with eyewitness sightings. I sometimes have believers who will jump on me saying, "Oh, well, you're dismissing all eyewitness sightings." My answer is no, I'm not at all. Absolutely not. If you're an eyewitness to anything, a crop circle being made, or a ghost case, or a cryptid, whatever it is, or UFO, I will listen to it. I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm not going to ignore you. I will listen to what you have to say, and if you have other evidence, if there's other eyewitnesses or photographs, I'll look at it. But they need to understand that I'm not going to simply take their word for it. I can't simply say, well, just because someone says I saw something I can't explain, that doesn't mean they saw a ghost. It just means they saw something they can't explain.
Look, Benjamin Radford, is there any case you've seen that is the closest to coming near any kind of evidence of some sort of paranormal event that hasn't quite made it but has gone, you've gone here? Probably there's a handful of cases I can think of. One that jumps to mind is I did a haunting investigation in Buffalo, New York a couple years back. It's one of the case chapters in my book. And it was a mother and a child and a father, and the father, they had a whole classic haunted house thing. They had they had footsteps in the hallway and demonic pictures, and the cats were acting weird. They had basically all the classic haunted house stuff, including the guy claimed that a ghost had kicked him. He was actually assaulted by a ghost. And this was unusual. I mean, I'd explained virtually all the other phenomena. In this case, I was scratching my head thinking, what the hell's going on here? Because what was he doing at the time? Was he asleep? Was it in daylight?
He was going to sleep. And in each case is what is the context here? Again, were you going to the store to get some milk? When was this? And he said, well, it happened several times as he was going to sleep, which was a little bit of a clue for me. But it didn't necessarily explain it because, I go to sleep all the time. I don't necessarily feel ghosts, attacking me or kicking me. And anyway, again, the case is too detailed to go into. But essentially, what I realized was that he had what's called restless leg syndrome, and his leg, he had sleep apnea. And one of the symptoms of sleep apnea, as I researched it, was that your leg will twitch. And at the time, he was sleeping alone he was a big guy. He's probably 300 pounds. His leg would twitch as he was going to sleep. And he interpreted that within the context of a haunted house case as a ghost kicking him. Wow. And so that was a case where, it was until I solved it, that was a head scratcher because that was one of the main claims, and that was the last one because I'd solved all the other parts, and there was this one last thing. I'm like, how the hell? And then I finally figured it out.
I know there's people out there that are going to be saying, oh, yeah, this Radford guy, he's a government asset. He's put there for misinformation to skew people away from the truth. Is there any... Are you here as a part of a misinformation plan?
Yes.
There we go. Well, we could have said that at the beginning and cut the interview a bit short there. And you must get that. You must have people coming up to you very angry that they think you're part of something, and you're
Yeah, probably the worst are the UFO folks and the anti-vaxxers. Obviously in this line of work, when you're investigating people's claims, you piss everybody off. You piss off psychics. You piss off, snake oil peddlers. You piss off a lot of people. Not intentionally. I don't go into trying to get anybody, but if you're making claims, I'm going to investigate them, and if you're wrong, I'm going to call you on it. Period. End of story.
And it's actually amazing how many people don't call them on their claims, isn't it? Yeah. You go, people either don't worry about it or they don't care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. And also the same thing happens with many scientists. I mean, oftentimes I'll hear people saying, well, the scientists haven't come out and disproven me. Well, the scientists are busy doing science. Nuclear physicists are busy, medicine. I mean, it's just the idea that the scientific community should stop what they're doing and investigate is just... Anyway, so yeah, but I get accused of being a tool of big pharma, NASA. Basically, anytime that I write something, someone will comment and criticize me and say, "Oh, well, the only reason you're saying that is because you have some sort of agenda." And what's interesting to me is just the mentality behind that. That their assumption is that the only reason that we might disagree, the only reason that I might be writing something or discussing something that is contradictory to their point of view is that I must be paid off. I must have a bias. I must be instead of maybe I know more about it than they do. Maybe I've researched it. Maybe I've personally done it. No. Their assumption is that by definition, if you disagree with them, then you're either completely wrong and stupid, or you're being paid off. And that's such an arrogant point of view.
Now, if you had an unlimited budget, which of course working for the government you must have, is there one conspiracy theory or anomaly that you'd like to investigate that has so many tangents, like what is claimed happened on 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, ones that just run everywhere? Is there something as far-reaching as that you really would like to if you had your own department and unlimited funds?
That's a good question. I've written and researched some on conspiracy theories. Honestly, it gets to the point where they just get really tiresome because you can put forth the same information and they won't. You're not operating on the same premises, and so it just gets pointless. I mean, it's sort of like oftentimes I've been in debates and heard debates between conspiracy theorists and skeptics. And it's like people talking, it's like the arguments between atheists and fundamentalist Christians. They're operating on different premises, and they go back and forth, and nothing gets done. And there's times when I was talking to a conspiracy theorist on 9/11 about 9/11 attacks, and he's talking about how a plane didn't actually hit the Pentagon. And he's all these stories. Well, it was really a missile, and I finally just said, well, where's the plane then? He said, what do you mean? I said, you're saying that a plane did not hit the Pentagon. Where is the plane? Where are the people on that plane? If you're telling us that is not what hit the Pentagon, then you need to explain why this plane took off. This particular plane took off with these people and this luggage and didn't go anywhere else in the world. They didn't land anywhere else. So where are they? Like, I don't know. I'm like, no, you don't, do you?
Yeah. I mean, and I've pushed people on this one, and the plane landed somewhere and the people were offloaded. That means that those people have either been imprisoned or killed.
Right, the problem with these sorts of conspiracies is that in order to bolster their beliefs, they have to come up with more and more outlandish and elaborate scenarios. And so, in fact, I had this. I confronted a conspiracy theorist last year at DragonCon, and I was on a panel, and we had a 9/11 guy come up, and he starts going into his spiel about poking holes and all this. I said, I'll let you. I said, he's a guy in the audience. And I said, okay. I said, before you go any further, what do you think happened on 9/11? And he says, well, I think that there was a cover-up. I said, no. I'll ask you again. What happened? You're telling us that the official story is all wrong, and you're poking all these holes in it. You tell it if you have better information than we do. Tell us what happened. What exactly happened? Well, we don't know. So I was like, well, hold on here, hold on. So you don't know what happened on 9/11, but you're convinced that the official story is all wrong. And I said, does that seem weird to you? I mean, that you can't offer a better explanation? And he just got flustered and walked off.
I mean, there are many anomalies on that day that fascinate me, and for many years I was always wondering about them. But I guess there's maybe just some things you'll never know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and especially it's important to recognize that there are things that we will just never know for sure. And that doesn't make them supernatural. It doesn't make them especially mysterious. It just means that there are things that we don't know. To this day, no one is completely sure where Amelia Earhart is. There's been new evidence in the last year or two that she might have we don't know. Natalie Holloway, the teenager missing in Aruba. Where we don't know. And again, it doesn't mean that she was kidnapped by aliens. It doesn't mean that she's living on a planet somewhere. It just means that there's simply not enough evidence. And so and especially with something as complex as the 9/11 attacks.
And what about if you take one item from that day in isolation and concentrate on that fact? Is that a sensible way to approach this as well? Like the ground effect and the height of the plane that apparently hit the Pentagon, and that if you look at that kind of a thing, is that helpful at all or not, or is that over looking at one thing? Is that just a bad way to do things?
Well, yeah, the thing is, you can always nitpick on something and try and claim that one anomaly or a perceived anomaly somehow deflates the whole thing. And that's simply not true because, there may be misunderstanding. I mean, for example, I've got a friend of mine who's a physicist, Dave Thomas in New Mexico, and he's basically refuted a lot of the claims about, about how the floor is pancaked and this and that, and the presence of dust and explosives.
Nanothermite,
yeah, exactly. And and there's actually been some research that was published just in this past year that basically debunked the whole nanothermite story. And so again, a lot of times what you find is that things that are claimed to be anomalies or appear to be anomalies are not necessarily anomalies. And even if you can say, well, this part of the story is wrong or mistaken, that doesn't mean that the whole story is wrong or mistaken. I mean, for example, I think of the O.J. Simpson case, the infamous O.J. Simpson case, where it was a complex case, and it was pretty clear to most people that he was actually guilty. But there was a famous incident where there was a bloody glove.
That's right.
And he was asked to put on the glove, and he put on the glove in the courtroom, and the glove did not fit. So it's not real clear where the glove came from, but so the defense's point was that, look, they're saying this blood is the killer, this glove is the killer. It doesn't fit him, therefore he couldn't have done it. And it's like,
if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Exactly, and that's fallacious reasoning because just because that particular glove wasn't used by him does not mean he didn't do it. It just means that.
And also, as blood dries, it would also shrink the glove potentially.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different aspects to it. And so, again, the notion that if you can find one or two or even several details that are wrong or not quite correct, that doesn't mean anything. Especially in a case that is complex as the 9/11 attacks or the Kennedy assassination. There's tens of thousands of pages of documents, scans, photographs. There's so much evidence out there that, yeah, I'm sure that, it would be remarkable if every single piece did fit. Think about it.
And what's your next challenge? What's one? You want something a bit more relaxing? Do you want to look at? Well, one I wrote down here is that people who have mind-altering drug experiences with shaman yet seem to have the same experience whenever they take this drug. I find that an interesting one. Will you be heading off to South America to drink some wacky weed?
I've been to South America several times. In fact, I'm going to Brazil next week.
Okay.
So I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah.
Because I just find it odd that people seem to be having a similar experience when they take a drug. I guess that could be the drug's action itself. But
yeah, that would be. I don't find that mysterious myself. For example, you see that with recreational drugs. I mean, you you can determine to some degree what a drug is based upon its pharmacological symptoms. So, for example, a person who's describing a heroin experience will describe something different than a person describing a methamphetamine experience or a marijuana experience. So just because a person, or antidepressants is a perfect example. So just because a person is taking a typical a particular kind of drug, and those people are reporting similar symptoms, doesn't, to me, necessarily suggest anything unusual.
There was a party photographer on the scene in Sydney in the mid-90s and at the rave parties, and that she could tell, because she was a non-partaker in anything, by the photos, the colour of the person's face. There was something, a slight coloration of their face. She could tell what they were on, whether they were coked, whether they were on E, whether they were on acid. She reckoned there were certain slight colorations in the skin tone. I always thought that was an interesting theory. Difficult to get it past an ethics committee, I would feel.
Yeah, different to falsify. I mean, without getting people and doing blood samples, but yeah, it's an interesting idea. Sure.
So you're heading off down south. You got to let us into what you're getting in on, so we can all jump in there and get the book before you by doing a lot shonkier research than you try.
Yeah. Actually, this is more of a recreational pleasure cruise.
There we go. That sounds like a cool thing. And where can we find you online to have some really long back and forth, long email with arguments in caps?
Oh yeah, I love those. Yeah, the more explanation points in caps, the better. You can find me at BenjaminRadford.com, BenjaminRadford.com. I also do columns for Discovery News and LifeScience.com. I'm also a co-host on the MonsterTalk podcast for those who like monsters.
Wow. And do you have the opinion, as you mentioned earlier, just as the very last point, and I've kept you for a long time, I'm sorry about that, in that, you know how atheists don't think that they should actually debate creationists because they are talking a completely different language. Do you think that sometimes science debating pseudoscience gives pseudoscience more cred than it deserves?
At times, yes. That's clearly the case, for example, with creationism, where just the act of being photographed discussing something with hardcore creationist, someone like Richard Dawkins or someone else. It gives them this undeserved credibility. That being said, there are certainly times when people need to engage with the believers, and I'm a big believer in that, so to speak.
When was the last time you were somewhere and you were going, no, I'm not going to. Okay, I'm going to engage. What usually trips you over the edge, and what happened yesterday?
Well, someone was talking about.
Because I reckon you'd make a noise just before you go into an argument.
Well, no,
because let's face it, you could take Deepak Chopra in a fight, really.
Sure. Yeah. It's to my mind, where the line crosses is when somebody says, if they just say, I believe something. I believe in The Secret. I believe in, which is one of your imports. Thank you very much. I believe in
You're welcome.
I believe in all these crazy things. If someone just says that, then I just let it go because I'm not going to try to convince someone that they should not believe in angels. It's not going to do me any good. It's not going to do them any good. What do they want to believe? At the point in which, number one, it's harming people, in which there's actual harm or certainly strong potential harm, that's when I'm going to speak up and say, no, this is you need to pay attention to the facts.
What was the case yesterday?
Well, it was about anti-vaxxers, right. And someone's talking about, well, we should have a right. No one shouldn't force us to do anything. I said, no one's forcing you to do anything. These are the laws in the country, and if you don't want to do that, you can do whatever the hell you want. But they're for social health and social contract. And public health, which you should care about, and your own children's safety, you need to get your children vaccinated. And I wasn't going to buy for a second this whole notion of, well, my rights. Well, screw your rights. Screw your rights if it's going to cause your own children. They're not old enough to make their own decisions. If they're adults and they don't want to be vaccinated, that's fine. That's their decision. But if you're going to make these decisions for your child, and your child then comes down with polio or measles or whooping cough, I'm not okay with that.
And we mentioned the first thing you should take into an investigation is information. What's the first point you should be skeptical about an extraordinary claim?
Well, the first one it would be to make sure that you understand that if a claim is actually being made. A lot of times, before you begin investigating something, you need to find out, did it really happen? So, for example, if somebody says, I saw a UFO, over my backyard yesterday, then you're going to want to get other people information. So my point is that, you know, before you begin looking at weather patterns, flight, you know, plans from the nearest airport, all these other things, ask other people. And it could be that, you know, someone else was in the same was with the person at the time, and they're like, well, I was there, I didn't see anything. It's like, well, hold on here. So before, and same thing with ghost cases, you know, where somebody, you know, the ghost hunters will go into an investigation and immediately begin looking into, like, the history of the house, and, oh my God, was there someone named Mary who lived here? And they go off and off and off, and they forget to investigate the original claim. The original claim is, it's not that someone named Mary lived in the house. The original claim is that there's a creaking in a hallway when no one's there. So you need to investigate the creaking in the hallway before you spend 45 minutes or 45 hours, you know, looking into the history of the house and trying to, you know, connect it to the phenomena.
Look, this will be the last question. I really enjoy Ancient Aliens because I just think it's wacky, it's out there, I love it. What is the craptastic investigation show that you will kind of enjoy watching, or because of the way you investigate, you can't abide any of them?
The worst one, honestly, is probably the Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures, just because it is so far removed from anything resembling science. Sometimes I find it just maddeningly hilarious, and sometimes I find it maddeningly frustrating. It's just one of those two. It's just odd to see these grown adults pretending to do science and pretending to do investigation, and oftentimes fooling people into thinking they are. And there's just nothing of the sort going on. It's just, you know, a vacuum of stupidity, and it's either funny or sad depending on how you look at it.
And of course, the shows are really popular. You think people are just looking for the other, and the truth isn't that interesting to them.
Yeah, I mean, which is a shame to me, because I think the world is fascinating enough as it is. I don't need to. You know, we don't need to look for Bigfoot and Nessie and Yowie and Chupacabras to find amazing animals. I mean, we have, you know, bats and cuttlefish and squid, and there's amazing animals all around.
And the pygmy hippo, one of the few animals in nature that looks like it's wearing a skivvy or a polo neck.
Absolutely, and all these things are out there, and so in a way, I kind of feel sad for people who aren't satisfied with our world, because there's so much out there.
The Hansard is a podcast of the monthly lectures run by Canberra Skeptics Incorporated. Each month, Canberra Skeptics provides experts in their field, ranging from science and philosophy to politics and national security, with an opportunity to present their views. You can find us at www.canberraskeptics.org.au. The Hansard, Canberra Skeptics' Record of Reason.
Joining me now all the way from the sun-drenched streets of Melbourne, Australia, Adam VanlangenbergWhy. Hello, Adam.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm so interested to learn that you conducted an experiment in your classroom, in your skeptical sort of club, which you can tell us a little bit about, all about testing, well, I guess ESP in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess in a way. I mean, a specific subset of ESP. Can you tell whether or not somebody's staring at you without actually being able to see them? Which is a type of ability that a lot of people often claim to have. You know, I get the feeling that somebody's looking at me, and they turn around and sure enough, somebody is.
Well, that's an interesting thing because, I've had the feeling from time to time, I think somebody's looking at me. I think it's a very common experience. Whether people are looking at you or not is a different story, of course. So you set about to test whether your students could really tell if somebody was sort of staring at them. Yeah,
we thought we'd, given the challenge, see what we could do. So I got 6 kids in the group, and I said... Well, I said to the group, has anybody ever had that feeling before? And just about every hand went up, so I got 6 kids out of that group and thought, let's actually put this to the test. So I put buckets on their heads.
Buckets on their heads.
That wasn't part of the experiment. That was just something I've been meaning to do as a teacher for years.
I see, but let's just backpedal a bit there. Why on earth did you put buckets on their heads? Because I must tell our listeners that I and the Mr. Investigators many years ago did a little video about how to construct a test if somebody was staring at you, and I understand that you saw this, but you've taken it one step forward, one step more. Why the buckets?
Well, I was just a little bit worried. I thought if a student could see somebody else raise their hand or stand up, indicate that they thought that they were being stared at, maybe that might encourage them to not do it. They might think if the person next to me is being stared at, then there's less of a chance that I'm being stared at. So I just wanted to eliminate that possibility a little bit. And also, to be honest, it was quite fun because I was able to advertise on the school bulletin by saying, do you enjoy wearing buckets on your head? Do you think you can tell when you're being stared at? If so, come along.
Well, I'm all for it. Anything you can do to encourage students to take part in an interesting experiment like that. So that they turned up and they're all there to see whether they had this extra sense, this extra ability. And how did the test go?
It went quite well. I was worried. I'm always a little bit worried when doing an experiment where probability plays a large part in it, because there's always the chance that the kids get it 100% correct. So I'm a little bit nervous when doing things like that, just in case that happens. But fortunately, it didn't. One of the things I actually want to say, one of the kids came up with a really brilliant thought at the start of it. The room that we did it in has got these big windows which look into one of the courtyards in the school, and a student started shutting the curtains. And I said, "Oh, no, don't shut the curtains. It's quite a nice day outside. Let's get some sunlight in." And the kid said, "But what if people outside see what we're doing and start looking into the room, and that will muck up who we're all staring at?"
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
That's very, very clever. Because for the experiment, we had a random number appear, and whatever number appeared, the kids all had to stare at that person. So they thought, what if people outside are staring at the wrong person? That might stuff things up. But the experiment went well. They were a little bit nervous at the start, a bit too timid to put their hands up, but they picked up on it pretty quickly. And I do have to admit, I got a bit worried when one of my boys kept his hand down for quite a while. And then on the 7th trial, we actually stared at him for the first time and his hand went straight up. And all of us are sort of looking at each other and going, "Oh, have we just found an actual psychic? Have we got a contender for the Australian Skeptics $100,000 prize?"
Is this a classic case of correlation does not equal causation?
Well, I was hoping it would, because I would have liked to have. I would have claimed, I think, a little bit of that prize had he won it. But unfortunately, his abilities left him pretty quickly, and then he kept putting up his hand in the wrong point. Oh. So, in the entire thing, in the time we had, we could only run 18 trials. But in those 18 trials, we had one person put up their hand when they were being stared at.
Okay, it's probably a tad below what you would expect, but it is a limited sample size.
It was a very small sample size, yeah. It was below what we expected, so I actually think that the reason a lot of these kids come to the Skeptics Club is because they're anti-psychic. They actually have some kind of psychic power that blocks their ability to detect things. Well,
that's an old excuse run by us when psychics, I use the term in quotation marks, fail various tests by the skeptics. Sometimes I say, "Oh, that's because the skeptics were there blocking our powers," or something like that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
You've discovered
with our own magical powers.
A room full of students who can do this amazing power. Well, that in itself is a psychic power. So that in itself, you could probably apply for the $100,000 prize.
That's a good idea. Get a few skeptics in and stop their abilities from working.
You're starting to do my head in, Adam. But apart from having people wearing buckets and kids staring at other kids, it sounds like, and I was very lucky, I was a guest of yours, a year or two now ago, to speak at your Skeptics Club. How is the Skeptics Club at your school going in general?
It's going well. I've got my nice little group of regulars coming along. I've had some kids express an interest in actually running a few sessions, which is wonderful to hear. It's sort of at the start of it, they were just, coming along to the sessions and listening to what I had to say and, having discussions. But now they're actually going off and looking up things on their own. I've got one girl who came to me just the other day, and she said, all of my Year 7 students, the other Year 7 students, are really worried about this Illuminati group.
Oh, really?
So amongst a lot of the kids, they've been passing around these YouTube videos and sharing them on Facebook about the Illuminati. So she was saying, can you do something about that, and can you try to get these kids and, talk to them about what's happening there? I started up a website for the group, just a Google site through the school's network a while ago, and sort of got a bit... I stopped doing it because the idea of it was just to, teach people about different areas in skepticism, but I figured there are a million websites out like that anyway, so why reinvent the wheel? But just a couple of weeks ago, one of my kids had found that and said, well, why don't we start doing it? We can go and research different topics, and then we can write little articles about them and put them up on the site. So I thought that was great as well. And even a couple of kids who, the next time there's a Skeptic camp, because they've heard about the Skeptic camps, and they've said, could we do a Skeptic camp? Could we actually come along and give a presentation?
Wow, that's fantastic.
So they're really starting to get into the idea of not just come to the club to learn about things, but now to actually start taking those things on board and maybe teach other people.
That's very encouraging. Now, of course, you're going to be a speaker, as I will be, at the upcoming Australian Skeptics National Convention. Are any of your students planning to come along?
Yeah, I've got one student so far has confirmed that she's coming along. I think she actually had to make a decision between that or spending the money on something else that she'd been really looking forward to doing, and she was sort of trying to make a decision about it. But just the other day she said, nope, I've decided I want to come to the Skeptics Convention.
Good for her.
I think also the thought of being at the thing and getting to meet James Randi in person would get quite excited. She's actually very excited about a lot of the people coming along. She's going, James Randi's there, she's watched heaps of his YouTube videos. She listens to your podcast. Oh, cool. So she's excited to meet you and Dr. Rachie. She's excited to meet Rebecca Watson because she follows her as well. So it's nice to hear, a 15-year-old girl getting excited about meeting her skeptical heroes.
Well, it's very encouraging to hear that, and I can't wait to meet her at the convention and have a chat with her about her outlook. Now, before we go, it always interests me because, as you know, I also do educational outreach. I do a show called The Mystery Investigators with Dr. Rachie and Ian Bryce from time to time. And one of the things that really interests me when I'm talking to school students is what they've heard about. And I always try to remember back to when I was their age in the 1970s, and that was a really big time for UFOs and Bigfoot especially, I remember. Have you discovered or have you found much the same thing, that kids are really still interested in monsters and UFOs and like we could say the old-fashioned sort of phenomena?
Not monsters so much. The biggest thing I hear about from kids is conspiracy theories.
Really? Wow.
That's what they're sort of into a little bit at the moment. There's like I mentioned before, the idea of the Illuminati. Yeah. And another teacher just a couple of weeks ago actually said that a bunch of his Year 7 students were all talking about it wasn't the Illuminati, but again, it was a similar thing. It was about a shadowy organisation that sort of was controlling a lot of governments and stuff like that. So conspiracy theories are a bit big at the moment. UFOs, definitely. Yeah. They're interested in UFOs, but they're not. That's not the buzz. Right. The buzz at the moment.
Right. Well, I mean, my listeners of my age and around my age, of the sort of the mid-40s or that era, will certainly remember what it was like in the 1970s with UFO documentaries and movies and aliens everywhere. I mean, you couldn't leave the house without stumbling over an alien or two. I guess things change, and it's interesting to hear that kids are somewhat interested in all the conspiracy theories out there. Now, I really think what you're doing is a great idea, this whole skeptical club at the school. How can other teachers listening to this who think that might be a good idea, how can they get in contact with you?
Best way to contact me is through my blog, where each week I write up what we've done in the group, so people that want to see what type of activities we do and what type of discussions we have, what the kids have to say. I put all of that straight up on the website. So the address to that is www.skepticschool.com. and it's Skeptic with a C.
Oh.
If there's another website, Skeptic with a K. I think that goes to the JREF page, actually.
Oh, right.
But Skeptic School with a C will go to my blog, and from there they can leave a comment or send me an email. They can also Skeptic School, if they search for that on Twitter.
Okay.
So they can follow me through Twitter. And, I mean, there's a Facebook page as well, so you can do a search for Skeptic School there also.
And I noticed that in the very latest issue of the Skeptic magazine, that's the Skeptic magazine from here in Australia, the Australian Skeptics magazine, there is a report, a write-up of your staring test with the buckets.
Yeah, I've had a look at the sample of that as well, so I'm looking forward to that coming out also.
Well, Adam, all power to you. I really appreciate what you're doing in the classroom there. You know what? It's been a while. I'm going to have to make a trip down to Melbourne, maybe early next year, and give another talk to your skeptical group. I'd really like to do that.
Absolutely, the kids would love to see you again. I know that much.
Adam Vanlangenberg, the Skeptical Teacher from Melbourne. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Wow, what an interesting life Ben Radford has, folks. I'd love to go out one day with Ben and have an investigation into some mystery or ghost or monster or something like that. That would be fantastic fun. And well done to Adam VanlangenbergWhy for really helping to spread the skeptical message, which is really science, in the schools the way he does. It's hats off to you, Adam. Well done. Now, before I go, the folks who are involved in putting together the convention in Melbourne at the end of November, well, there's an idea that if we can do it in time, if we can organise it, we'd love to have somebody apply for our $100,000 prize, or indeed the James Randi $1 million prize, and have them tested, or at least have somebody give a demonstration of their amazing power or ability during the Melbourne Convention, if we can arrange it. So if you're out there and you'd like to strut your stuff for James Randi or the Australian Skeptics or something like that, and you have my personal ironclad guarantee we shall treat you fairly and with respect, and any tests we do are designed for you to win. If you have your power, if your power is real, then the tests are specifically designed so you will pass them. Contact us. Let us know if you're at all interested, and the best way to do that is via www.vicskeptics.wordpress.com. There's $1 million out there, or at least 100,000 from Australian skeptics. Have a think, contact us, and we'll see what we can cook up. Well, it's still a lovely day outside. I think the planes are sort of all landed now, or they're all taken off to somewhere. I'm going to go outside. It's such a beautiful day. I'm going to find some soft serve ice cream. Oh, yeah. Chocolate dipped. Yeah. That'll get me through until next week's episode of The Skeptic Zone. Until then, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.